On Point, hosted by Peter van Aartrijk. Conversations with interesting and informative experts on technology, branding, culture, social media marketing, and other great topics.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Peter van Aartrijk, your host for On Point, brought to you by our good friends at Wells Media, which includes Carrier Management, Insurance Journal, and other fine publications. This episode of Insurance Journal's On Point podcast is sponsored by AM Best Information Services. Turn to AM Best for solutions to the complex challenges you face with ratings, research, news, and data analytics to cover the insurance industry. Our guest today is Itai Ben-Zaken, the founder and CEO of Honeycomb, which is AI-driven technology to analyze aerial photographs of building roofs to assess their condition, which of course helps with physical inspections, reducing the cost of those. And I'm sure there's much more to Honeycomb we'll learn from Itai. Itai, thanks for joining us. I appreciate your time. I know you're busy in New York City today.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate you having me and looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, thanks. And tell us a little bit about yourself first, if you would, sir. Where are you from originally?
Sure. So I'd say my background is a combination of technology and insurance. I'm originally from Israel, studied computer engineering at the beginning of my career and worked as a software engineer. So I'm a techie to begin with. Worked a few years in the tech business as a software developer, and then moved to the US in 2006, did my MBA at Wharton, and then worked in Silicon Valley, initially for BCG, and then I moved to work for an internet company in Silicon Valley called Queen Street, which is a public company now. And that's where I got to know the insurance world. I got to manage a product there that or a new acquisition for the company called insure.com. And then I built that business to be a pretty substantial part of Queen Street's business. So that's where my insurance background comes from. After I spent 4 years at Queen Street managing that part of the business, I started my first company, which was a tech company focusing on advertising technology and leveraging natural language processing for better targeting. And in 2019, I started Honeycomb, which is my second startup, focusing on becoming a leader in the commercial real estate insurance business, leveraging deep technology to create unique advantage. So that's my background.
So 2019 was just before COVID. What was the impact on you guys as you were building the company?
Yeah, so it was at the beginning, it was pretty substantial. So funding was a lot less abundant because we were kind of raising right after COVID started. Everybody was a bit in shock. So yeah. It was a little bit, of a setback. But at the same time, the fact that we chose insurance, it's a bit more, it's a much more resilient business than other businesses because people have to buy insurance. And actually, when COVID hit, it also created more price sensitivity in the market because people were looking for, how to save costs. So it was eventually actually a good booster for us from that perspective. It also meant that we had to start with a pretty distributed team. But I think just like the rest of the world, we kind of learned how to do that. And it eventually didn't become an issue. When COVID ended, we started consolidating our business and our locations a bit more. I still think that the interpersonal interaction or the in-person interaction makes a big difference. So we tried to consolidate our headquarters into two, one in Israel and one in Chicago.
Okay. Can you imagine if you owned a restaurant or an events company those people really suffered. And you're right about insurance being resilient. I looked at it going back to the Great Depression, all these crises over 9/11, COVID was one, the dot-com bust, financial meltdowns, even the Great Depression, insurance did really well relative to everything else because people did not want to not pay their premiums. They might not buy everything, but they were afraid that was it. If they weren't able to insure a loss, that they'd really be in trouble. So it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, it's true for other types of crisis. I mean, since we started Honeycomb, I'd say COVID was the first crisis, but then you also had the boom and bust of funding and, just in general into 2021, 2022, post-COVID. And then after that, things really slowed down. Again, for us, it was like less fluctuations because insurance is a resilient business. When, a lot of the, super high growth companies that pushed a lot of growth but didn't really focus on margins started having trouble when the market turned in 2022. I think companies like us who were able to continue to deliver real numbers and narrow down loss margins didn't have issues. So
Yeah.
it's maybe a little bit less sexy, and that's probably why we like it. Like I like innovating in areas where you really have to go deep, and if you choose this market, you really have to go and like do a small PhD thesis on like how it works. It's very complex, but once you're there, I think that's part of the moat that you're building. That it's kind of hard for others to come and just, oh, it's an interesting business, I want to do that too.
Yeah. I think a lot of insuretechs discovered that when they, when you know the story when they all first came out, and a lot of them didn't make it, especially those who were looking to disintermediate agents and brokers. I think they struggle more than others, but also the carriers struggle with the whole concept of how people from outside the industry coming in with all these great ideas. They were like, wait a second, we're not sure we trust you, and you don't understand how underwriting works and so forth. But I think there's it's a very happy place now, that relative to when it all first started with the insuretechs.
And there's a pretty interesting part of our journey that kind of talks about some of these items that you just mentioned. When we started, I mean, we had big ideas, big visions, a pretty good idea of how we wanted to do that. And because we entered the market a little bit after the skyrocketing of some insuretech 1.0 companies, we did get a lot more scrutiny from reinsurers. So at the beginning, it was annoying, and I was like, "Yeah, I want to go. I think we know what we want to do." But we got a lot of good feedback from our reinsurers, and I think what we built, even though it took us a little bit more time, I think some of that scrutiny and advice that we got from reinsurers made the company a lot more robust, and our growth path a lot more stable. So that, I think, also kind of a natural progression of how insuretech is developing. And I think we're not the only company that, I would say, maybe we're insuretech 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever you want to call it, but it's a bit more of a mature business model that starts with more focus on loss ratios, margins, and we're still able to grow relatively fast because there's such a void in the market. But it's probably a more balanced approach of growth versus profitability compared to the early days, where I think there were attempts to do really big land grabs and figure out profitability later. And for us and for other companies who started more in 2021, 2022, I mean, we started selling in 2021. I think there's a balanced approach.
Yeah, well said. Well, let's learn more about Honeycomb. Talk to us about the mission, the target customer, and the need you're filling for them, and even the better world that you envision for those people, your business partners, your customers.
Yeah, so I mean, the vision for Honeycomb is to become the primary destination for anything that is commercial real estate. Starting from the US market, eventually expanding to other markets. And we started our journey. I mean, we've identified this market as very attractive because we saw a really big gap, because we saw it was very underserved. It's different from some of the personal lines markets, which I think advanced a lot quicker because they're bigger and because they're a little bit more simple and more uniform, and it's bigger scale and less severity. So insurance companies were able to take bigger risks in automating and creating a better customer experience. In commercial real estate, which is a pretty big market, these were situations where things were a lot slower, where things were the prices and the decisions from insurance companies were very uniform, and there wasn't really a lot of use of data or enough use of data and technology that advanced way beyond what insurance companies were doing. And when we saw that, and we were looking at starting an insuretech MGA, but initially we were looking at a few different markets. This market attracted us very, very much because it ticked a lot of these marks that we were looking for. It was very underserved. It was very fragmented, meaning that we didn't have to go against Geico and Progressive and start building a brand that big. And even, that's a lot harder than actually coming into a market with no leader and delivering a really great result. It's easier to penetrate. And then eventually what we saw is that the market was underserved because a lot of data deficiencies, because a lot of areas where there was some interesting data that could have led to better underwriting decisions, but the dots were not connected and everything was still done manually. So it was always a trade-off for these big companies or medium-sized companies in the market, whether to deliver a good loss ratio with a very high expense ratio, because you have to have a lot of underwriters and a lot of manual labor, or when they tried to push automation that was a little shallow, then they reduced their expense ratios, but their loss ratios started skyrocketing. And what Honeycomb did is come in, respect a lot of the learnings that have been achieved and the best practices that have been accumulated in the insurance world or commercial real estate underwriting in the last 200 years, and start chewing into the pieces that made a lot more sense for an algorithm to take care of. And initially we started with almost zero automation, with big plans for what we want to automate, but step by step. And today we stand at around 60% automation of our underwriting operations with a very attractive and market leading loss ratio. So achieving the goal of creating efficiency, creating speed, better service to our customers, but not compromising the integrity of the core of the business, which is sound underwriting, risk selection, and good risk pricing.
Okay. So can you talk a little more about the technology that you're using and how it makes you different?
Yeah, definitely. So the technology that we built, I'd say, divides into two core areas. The first area is what I would call enabling technology, which is connecting a lot of the dots that some of the big carriers have trouble connecting because they're sitting on top of a lot of legacy systems, but not anything that you'd say is irreplicable. It's just a collection of really great technology stack that is very connected with all the data pieces and is able to provide answers and decisions in real time or in a much higher speed. And those are things like, we collect data from any available data sources out there, and we get the answers from customers on some of the questions that all the insurance companies are asking, but we're able to take all these data pieces and provide a more hyper differentiated price or a good price for an above average quality risk, and maybe a slightly higher price for a risk that we say is acceptable, but it's not as good as the other one. Insurance companies don't do that, and that makes a big difference. The second piece, which is the most exciting, is proprietary technology that we developed that you can't really find off the shelf anywhere else. Whatever we could find off the shelf, we use it. Like, I don't need to build something that is already out there and is very good. I'd rather focus my efforts on building something that doesn't exist. And we're lucky in the insurance world that we have so many things to build. There's no lack of new innovations to build. A lot of what we built in this area is computer vision and visual AI algorithms that look at imagery. Again, respecting the core discipline of underwriting that has been developed over hundreds of years in our space. What we learned from our professional underwriters that underwrote real estate insurance for decades is the first thing an underwriter does when they get a risk to their table is they take a look at the building itself. They open Google Street View or Google Maps, take a look at the roof from whatever photography they have. And that gives a lot of understanding for them on where this risk is going to go. Is it like a complete decline? Is it a complete accept? Or is it something that might require a bit more digging? And some of these activities were just like, we're in 2021 or 2020, like it doesn't make sense for an underwriter to go and look pixel by pixel on the roof to see if there are any broken shingles, right? There's AI that could do these today with enough sample, with a big enough sample. It could do it probably in a better quality and with less mistakes versus a human. So we developed a roof model that I'd say is the best in the industry, and it's also a roof model that's very tailored to our needs. There are other roof models off the shelf. We've examined them. We found that they were too generic because our class of risk is relatively particular. We insure larger buildings, multifamily property mostly. And that algorithm has, continued to evolve and is being updated every quarter by our underwriters. So every small change that they see that makes sense for them to make, they can basically go and tweak the algorithm, or the algorithm continues to learn based on some of the mistakes. Algorithms makes mistakes as well as people, but we use these mistakes as feedback loop, and then eventually the algorithm continues to learn. And I think that's also a very important element in the confidence that our underwriters and our underwriting leadership have in the algorithm. I think that's also one big differentiator between a company like us, which builds its own technology, and companies who develop technologies in boxes and try to sell them to insurance companies. For me, I mean, if our underwriters don't have confidence in the algorithm, then the algorithm doesn't go live. Then we continue to underwrite this manually until the algorithm gets to maturity. That gives the underwriters a lot of confidence and also a much higher likelihood to adopt technology. When, an underwriter needs to make a choice whether they take an off-the-shelf product, which who knows how it was built and how much influence they have on fine-tuning it, it's a much higher convincing bar. So those are, I'd say, the cherry on top in terms of what we're developing there, or the most exciting technology pieces. We've developed our roof model initially, and now we have models that also look at the externality of the building, at internal imagery that our remote inspection application is bringing, which is also proprietary data, which only us have access to. So those are the things that we really are known for, and continue to invest as we grow to create depth in the algorithms and to create additional algorithms that could basically look at other signals that maybe initially or traditionally in the industry you'd have an underwriter look at. And I would comment, like, the last piece, which is, I'd say, belongs more to the first category, but it didn't exist when we launched the company, but today is very prominent, is using LLM models like ChatGPT. That makes a lot of the processes that, again, you used to need somebody to go manually and do searches on, landlords, or searches on lawsuits. Like, you could do these things today with ChatGPT very effectively. You'd be surprised sometimes how cumbersome some of the larger organizations are in adopting these. And that's one of the advantages of being kind of a small, nimble tech company, that if there's something out there that makes sense, usually in 2 to 3 months, we can have it in production.
Interesting. Okay. So are you set up as an MGU or an MGA, Itai?
Yes, we're set up as an MGA, and we operate in 18 states in the US, covering roughly 60% of the US population. Yeah.
And are these admitted products, or that you're so you work with carriers? Is it admitted in surplus lines, or how do you, what kind of coverage is it?
Yeah. So we started as an admitted MGA with our fronting carrier, accredited surety and casualty, and they've been with us from the get-go. And in the summer of 2024, we introduced our ENS product, and that actually opened a lot of great opportunity for us and our broker partners. I'd say Honeycomb, part of our success is we hyper differentiate, and we risk select very carefully, and that did lead to a position where, in some cases it was a good property, but it didn't fit the charter that we had in admitted, and that was a shame. So we've identified that and built an ENS product that we launched this summer, and it basically expanded our ability to write a building that could be a really well-maintained building, but they had a lapse in coverage. That doesn't fit in our admitted appetite, but that could very well go into our ENS appetite. Or maybe a building that is really great, but the wiring is, hasn't been updated, doesn't work in admitted, but we take it in ENS every day. So it's both admitted and non-admitted. And the classes of business that we write today are apartment buildings, single-family rentals, and condo associations. We started just with condos and apartment buildings, and then we added SFRs a bit later.
Yeah, you mentioned the multi, what do we call it? The dwelling, like the condos. I guess I'm trying to figure. I finally figured out the branding, Honeycomb. That's very, very cool name. For those who want to check the site out, it's honeycombinsurance.com. But the name makes a lot of sense to me now. although it has a lot of other really cool qualities as a name. So congrats on that one. It's certainly unique.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we like the idea that, the honeycomb shape looks a little bit like a multifamily property, and the fact that honeycomb is home to the bee, very hard animal that we admire. And it's also a very strong foundation in nature that, carbon is basically honeycomb shaped when you go to the atomic level. So they all
little Easter eggs, as the millennials like to say, little nice little things there. So just from a personal experience, looking at the growth of homes and homes like the kind that you insure, it's unbelievable. And these kind of mixed use, people used to drive to shopping malls, and now they live above basically shopping malls, but they're outdoor town center type things. Is that in your sweet spot? Because that's all they're building. It's unbelievable. The growth of, I don't know how it pertains to single family and what that balance is. And you need rentals, you need condos, you need townhomes, you need everything. But it just seems like the growth of those kinds of dwellings. I just was out in Austin, Texas. I saw it there. We have it here in Tampa Bay area. It's astonishing, those new developments. Is that something that you're seeing as a growth opportunity, or do you avoid those things?
Definitely. I mean, this is one of the reasons also we introduced the ENS product, the excess and surplus product, because our appetite in admitted, it includes mixed use, but it's pretty limited in terms of the type of businesses that we can take. In ENS, we have a much broader appetite. So that's also part of capitalizing on that opportunity. We're also seeing, quite a bit of growth in SFRs. So that's another area that's why we said, that we want to also introduce product in that area. But I'd say beyond that, what we are seeing is also, as we continue to develop our relationships and understand a deep understanding of the market, we also understand that, multifamily or commercial residential, which is the market we started from, is just one piece of a broader piece, which is commercial real estate insurance. And there are a lot of commonalities, including the distribution channels, like the brokers, the professional brokers that we work with usually specialize in real estate. And they usually don't just do commercial residential, they do commercial residential and commercial non-residential. So part of the next growth paths for the company and the path forward in terms of the new growth engines that we're creating include launching additional products that are not too far from our core, that are complementary and basically create a destination that is a one-stop shop for our customers and our broker partners, so that they can leverage the same ease of use that they're getting in one product today across multiple products. And that usually means that it adds more than just the additional revenue that you can get from a new product. It adds that halo effect where, so now I can do everything on Honeycomb. So I'll definitely go there first.
Yeah. Niches are riches, as one agent said to me one time. It's so they specialize in commercial real estate. Is this an area, just in general, that has been sort of difficult for standard carriers to manage? You mentioned the word hyper differentiated, so I want to ask your take on what that means. But is this an area between admitted and not admitted that you're able to fill a gap that agents say they just can't get enough markets from the other carriers they work with?
Yes, and this is also one of the reasons that attracted us into this market. The risks that we're insuring are larger than personal lines risks. So the approach the carriers usually took here, and those are also a few segregated markets that require different type of expertise and require different pricing models. So the approach that a lot of the carriers have taken was a kind of a broad brush approach, which meant relatively uniform pricing for whatever was accepted, and pretty stringent rules about what would be accepted. Because when your underwriting model is not super precise, then you have to take some really big carve-outs from the market to avoid losses. So a lot of the carriers today who are still active in the market but don't have very deep sophistication or focus on the market usually just carve out everything that is older than 25 years old. And 80% of the residential units in multifamily in the US it has been, it's built before 2000. So yeah, I mean, if they write a new building, their likelihood to get a claim and their loss ratio is probably decent, but it means that they leave about 80% of the market underserved. And that's what we've seen. And again, it's not as like a simple solution where you come in and say, oh, I'm going to be the new carrier who insures everything, because then you're going to get super high loss ratios. To be able to do that, you got to build a deeper engine. And that deeper engine is based on what we call hyper differentiation. Hyper differentiation being not a one size fits all, but a very bespoke pricing mechanism and risk selection mechanism that says if you have a great building in a maybe neighborhood that has also other buildings that are not so great, we'd still insure you, and we're probably going to give you a really good price because we see the quality of the property, the ownership, and we can price to that and we can accept that. Similar when you think about how carriers look at wind hail deductibles. In high hail prone areas, carriers have to put high wind hail deductibles to stay profitable. The problem is not every building is built equally. Some buildings have much higher wind and hail footprint, and some of the others have actually a much lower wind and hail footprint. So by not just pricing to the average and saying everybody pays 2% deductible, we say, hey, good building, you might pay less than 2% deductible because we want you. And then we know we could be profitable on this building because they're going to be not even needing 1.5% deductible. We can make it work with this building, and vice versa. You might have other buildings that even at a 5% wind and hail deductible, they're going to be a loss business. So, if we take them in, we need to take them at the right deductible. And surprisingly, I mean, again, the industry hasn't done that until now because it's not the biggest market out there, because it's just one element out of many elements that you have to do to be profitable. In places where it was done manually. So the underwriter would take the risk in and they might do some back of the envelope calculation. If it's an underwriter who is very knowledgeable about residential, then they would make a great decision. But a lot of underwriting departments in the larger carriers and the traditional carriers, they do a lot of different things. So one day they would get an apartment building, another day they might get a manufacturing facility, and that doesn't create that specialization. So with the specialization and hyper differentiation that we've created, we can give customers the right price and the right fit for what they need. And we can still stay profitable as an insurance company, which is something that is not just important for us, it's important for our broker partners and for our customers. The worst thing that could happen to one of our broker partners or insureds in areas where you don't really have a lot of carriers who cover is that we'd come to them one day and say, hey, sorry, we didn't pay attention to our loss ratio, so now we're out of business. So that's something that creates that longevity and creates that connectivity between us being successful and our customers being served well.
Thanks. Itai, what do you see as you look at the insuretech landscape, generally speaking? I mean, it's been 10 or 12, maybe a little longer years since this started with all the investments. As we said, some worked out well, some haven't yet or haven't at all. Where is it today? And I know there's probably, I know you recently received some additional funding, but there's always the challenge of that. It has a lot to do with the economy as well, and the experiences that some of them had with insuretechs that haven't panned out as well. Beyond all that, what other challenges are you seeing in the marketplace?
Well, I think that the funding environment element is definitely making it more challenging for new types of innovators to come in. I mean, because of our relatively consistent performance and growth, we were able to secure the largest funding round in insuretech in 2024 or first half of the year in 2024. But I do see a lot of other companies who are in earlier stages struggling, and honestly, I think it's an overcorrection, which happens in many cases in the market. You had a few companies that went very fast and then had to backpedal a bit. Some of them are actually doing better today. Like look at Root, look at Lemonade. I mean, there's setbacks here and there, but we are seeing a lot more mature companies, and they have power to change. They're better insurance companies than the bigger companies, but yeah, they have to start somewhere, and they usually also have more concentration, which is typical. If you're Geico or Progressive, you've been in business for so many years, you have many lines, you have many geographies, you're less vulnerable to environmental effects or environmental fluctuations. When you're an insuretech that maybe has $1 billion in premium, that's still a small number. So you're more likely to be hurt by a fire in LA, and then the market reacts pretty badly to that. So that's a pretty big challenge. And I think, again, I think the market is starting to get this. We haven't seen a lot of IPOs. I hope that we'll start seeing more IPOs and more companies that can show consistent performance, which will mean that it would create more appetite. But that's something that I think remains a challenge. It relates to the environmental changes and the fact that we are seeing patterns of weather and temperatures and fires that we haven't seen that frequently in the previous decades. I mean, we had a hurricane in California last year, not a big one, but it missed San Diego by a bit. Had it not missed San Diego, could have been a pretty big one, and that's not something you typically see in California. We had the big LA fire, which, again, very sad, with so many people lost their homes and their lives. It's heartbreaking, but that makes it difficult for innovators who might come in with a great solution or a great idea for wildfire, because there's there's been such a big wildfire right now where we'd rather just stay away from that. So I think those are two challenges that I'm seeing, but I also think there's an opportunity there, right? I mean, if the weather patterns are changing, then the traditional models of insurance are probably not accustomed to deal with that well. And you need innovation. You need something that can detect and identify and start adapting to the new patterns faster. And that screams technology. So I think we will see, and we are already seeing, some innovators that are creating more interesting models, particularly to deal with weather patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the market gets back to understanding a bit more deeply that insurance can't stay the way it is. Like, it's a slow moving industry. It might not move as fast as some of the insuretech 1.0s thought that they could change the industry, but in 10 years or 20 years, we're definitely not going to see that much manual underwriting. We're definitely not going to see people Googling a landlord's name to figure out things, right? It makes sense, and it's probably going to go even faster. I mean, with what we're seeing happening. So challenges and opportunities. I think that technology has a ton that it could add to insurance, and that's what attracted us to this market, and that's what excites us every day.
Well, thanks, my friend. Just a couple of real quick questions back to you, the human being, for a moment. Is there something that occurred in your career where you said, I really screwed up, but more importantly, what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so I always wanted to start my own company. I worked in a few different shops, and I enjoyed what I did there, but I was itching to start my first company, and I did that in 2013. I started a company that was focused on an area that I thought was very interesting, and there was a lot of room for innovation. But I think we didn't choose the market well enough, because the market had a pretty big gap. I mean, this was an advertising technology company, and in 2013, that was the biggest, most interesting piece to solve. And we had some really great techies, and we had some really great technology, but it ended up being a duopoly in the market of Google and Meta. And despite the fact that we had a lot of great technology and energy, and it became a very tough market to operate in. And I think I learned three things from the Comprendi experience. The first, which is what I mentioned, like choosing the market very carefully could make the difference, even if you have an awesome team and an amazing technology and a ton of energy. It's so much easier to operate in a market where you can penetrate, where you're not up against Progressive or Geico or Google or Meta. So that's one thing. The second thing was about the role of technology. Again, I love technology. I grew up with technology. I think when when we started Comprendi, we came with a very strong technological approach to natural language processing, and we had some great talent in the team who knew how to solve very critical problems in the homeland security space, and do magical things in detecting all sorts of patterns in text. And we kind of threw that technology on top of a market rather than identifying a real problem and then choosing the technology to solve it. So I think that's the other big thing that we've implemented at Honeycomb, is saying technology is great, but it's a means to an end, right? There are places where you want to apply technology. There are other places where you can use something very simple, like an off-the-shelf product or a certain heuristic that's not necessarily reinventing the wheel. And if you're not going to do that, somebody else is going to do that with a lot less resources, and you might not win. And that's also what happened. Like, we've developed natural language processing that was able to detect context and things that maybe today are interesting in LLMs, and that's a different application. But for advertising technology, what some of the advertisers wanted was like, hey, can you show my ad for Pepsi when it gets hot in a certain city? And we built that, but that was not really differentiated technology, and that eventually didn't survive. So say choosing the technology to solve a problem and starting with a really tough problem that is critical in the market, I think that's another important learning from the Comprendi days. It was hard to close this company. Like, Comprendi was, my first startup, and I, believed in that. But I think it was a very important move to also realize, maybe that's the third learning, to know how to cut your losses. I think very, very dedicated, energetic, and passionate people sometimes tend to keep hitting their head against the wall sometimes when it's a problem that you might just want to walk away from. So knowing how to do that, which is hard because it goes completely opposite to the core DNA of the entrepreneur. I'm going to solve this problem. So I'd say all the learnings I've had.
It's not a straight line, life and business. It's got a lot of curves in it. Thank you for sharing that. And the last question, is there any one piece of advice, a mantra, or something that you keep in mind that you heard or came up with yourself that has guided you?
Yeah, I'd say, and this is something that I've kind of evolved with over my career. I think that it's really important to follow your passion and gut feelings, but always ground these with the numbers. If you're just calculating everything, you might miss, because we're humans and not everything is linear. And we're working with people and partners. There are a lot of those non-linear, non-computable elements to creating success. At the same time, if you're just going with passion and gut feelings and you're not grounding it with the numbers, then sometimes you're going a bit too far. So those two elements balancing each other is something that I'd say is kind of a guideline and a North Star to how I operate. And it's been working out quite well for me until now.
Well, great. Well, thanks for sharing that. And thanks for all the information. Wish you all the best with Honeycomb, and we'll see you down the road, maybe at a InsureTech Connect conference or something. Thanks, Itai.
Sounds great. Thank you again for having me. And I look forward to the next opportunity to meet and connect and talk about InsureTech and insurance.
Yes, sir. Take care.
This has been On Point with Peter van Aartrijk, a podcast presentation of Wells Media Group.